Hello, my name is Leena Shah, and I'm a developer at Oracle working on the content management headless samples. Today, I'm going to show you how to build a minimal sample in Svelte using Oracle Content and Experience as a headless CMS. Let's get started. The first thing we want to do is clone this repository in GitHub. This is a universal Svelte minimal sample that is already set up to use Oracle Content Management. Let's go ahead and clone this repository. Open up a command prompt and type in git clone and the repository URL. Now cd into the newly created directory. You can open the sample with the code editor of your choice. I will be using Visual Studio Code. I'm going to open up a new terminal. And the first thing we want to do is install the dependencies for this sample. For this, type in npm install. Now, while that is running, let's take a look at some of the files for this sample. The package.json file contains a number of scripts that can be used to build and start the sample. The dependencies section also lists all the dependencies that the sample has. Note the dependency on the content management SDK. You will also note a dependency on rollup, as we are using rollup as the JavaScript bundler for this sample. All of the configuration for rollup will be found in rollup.config.js file. The .env file is the OCE configuration file. We use environment variables to store configuration information about the Oracle Content Management Server. The server underscore URL is a public Oracle Content Management Server. The channel token is what will be used by Svelte to authenticate into our Oracle Content Management instance. One thing that's really important is to ensure that you configure your cross-origin resource sharing to avoid any distributed denial of service attack. It's best not to check this information in as part of your source control code, because attackers may use it to attempt to access your OCE instance. Now that the dependencies have been installed, let's go ahead and run a build. Type in npm run build. What this is going to do is create a folder called __sapper__, and it will also create a build folder underneath it, which contains client and server folders. This will make our universal Svelte sample available to use on our local machine. Once this is done, let's do npm run start. This command is spinning up a live local development server. Let's go ahead to the browser and see the sample in action. As you can see here, our headless Svelte minimal sample accesses a content item of the asset type minimal main, which consists of the header logo, the footer logo, and a list of pages. A page is of the asset type minimal page and has a list of sections. Sections are of the asset type minimal section, and they have a type field among all the other fields. On the home page, you will find two sections. If you navigate to the Contact Us page, it has 1, 2, and 3 sections. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the code which is making all this possible. You will find all of the source code under the source folder for this sample. Let's take a look at the scripts folder and the server config-utils.js inside of it. You will note that the first line imports the delivery client and the preview client from the content management SDK. You will also find a method defined to create a client called getClient. One of the things this file does is to instantiate a new client that will enable one to access the content stored in the Oracle Content Management Server. Here we are using the variables that were defined in the .env file to create the client. This method getClient is used by methods inside services.js. In services.js, you will find methods that encapsulate calls to the content SDK and return the results back to the Svelte components to be rendered. For example, here's a method that uses the content SDK to fetch the items by slug. This is another method which uses the content SDK to fetch an item with a slug of minimal main. In short, this file, services.js, contains all the content SDK calls the sample needs to render the data. In Svelte, you create pages by adding files to the source routes directory of your project. These will be server rendered so that a user's first visit to your app is as fast as possible. Then a client-side app takes over. In our site, we provide two routes. The root page, which is serviced by index.svelte. And then you also have a page route, which expects a slug to be passed in the request URL. Let's take a look at the index.svelte file. Here you will see that the component imports the API fetch os minimal main from services.js that we saw earlier. The preload function makes a call to the content SDK, and from the data that is retrieved, it fetches the first page from the content item and redirects to that page. That request is then serviced by slug.svelte. Here you will note in the preload function, it's calling the fetch page, passing in the slug that was received in the request URL. From the data that is returned back, it uses that to render into HTML. All of the pages have a header and a footer. So that is rendered by the layout.svelte component. Let's revisit the minimal sample in the browser once again. As you can see here, this is the home page that is being rendered by the index component that we saw earlier. And each page is rendered by the page slug component. All of this content is coming directly from our Oracle Content Management Server. Well, that's it from my end. Thank you for watching this video about how you can use Svelte in conjunction with Oracle Content Management as a headless content management system to build and implement a minimal app. You can find more samples like this on our headless Oracle Content Management documentation pages. Have fun building. Thank you.